So my name is Wyne. I currently work at Eurasia Group as a senior analyst in their global macro-geopolitics practice. I've spent, prior to working in the private sector, I spent a fair bit of time in the think tank community, so working at a few different think tanks, focusing primarily on U.S. foreign policy. Born in Charlotte, North Carolina, but grew up in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So that's home for me. I spent some time in Boston for school. So I did my undergraduate studies at MIT. I studied business, studied political science, and then I did my master in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School. And that brings us to the present. "9/11 happens, and it is a wake-up call. And I know it's become somewhat cliche to make that statement, but I think it's no less true for being cliched. It really was, it awakened me to a sense of danger in a way that I hadn't really felt prior to 9/11. It made me appreciate that oceans don't necessarily provide you full protection. And I think it also it awakened me to my own insularity. And then, of course, the following year, it's my senior year of high school, we're debating whether or not to intervene in Iraq. And that debate kind of, it flew over my head as well. And I realized with 9/11 and then with the decision to intervene in Iraq, I realized how insular I had been, how little I knew about the world. And I said to myself, I really need to learn about the rest of the world. The more you come from an underrepresented community or multiple underrepresented communities, the more of a chance there is that you're going to have others who typecast you, who tell your own story. So if you come from a certain background, then other individuals might assume that you must be interested in these topics, even if perhaps you're interested in those topics, but maybe you're interested in different topics. But you'll have other individuals who will, more often than not, they'll make assumptions, sometimes unwarranted, about what topics interest you, what passions you have, and they might try to pigeonhole you, they might try to typecast you, and it's really, really important that you be the author of your own story. And if other individuals try to typecast you, to respond not in a defensive way, not in any defensive or aggressive way, but just to say, well, here are the topics I'm interested in. On a pretty regular basis, I will reach out to individuals whose scholarship I respect, whose records of public service I respect, and I'll message them just to say, would you have time for a cup of coffee? I really admire your work, I admire your career, would love to just sort of hear your origin story. So several years ago, when I had started working at the Rand Corporation. I had a full-time job. I was working at the Rand Corporation, and I reached out to an individual who had been an ambassador and was heading up a research organization. Sent this ambassador an email, not looking for a job, because again, I had a full-time job at the Rand Corporation. But again, I reach out to people whose careers I respect, and I love hearing about individuals' origin stories. So she replied and she said, it's nice to hear from you. Come to my office. We'll have a cup of coffee. So I go to her office. We have a cup of coffee. We chat for probably it was about an hour and a half. We had a pretty long conversation, and I was just asking her how she got to where she was, who her mentors were. We had a really, really nice conversation. And at the end of the conversation, she says to me, oh, you can just drop your resume off over here. And I looked at her somewhat, I sort of had a puzzled expression on my face. I said, well, I don't have a resume, sort of, how do you mean? And she said, oh, aren't you here looking for a job? I said, no. I said, I have a full-time job. I said, I work at the Rand Corporation. I have a full-time job. I'm not looking for a job. I really admire you. I admire your career. I admire your perspectives. And I just thought that it would be really interesting to meet and hear your story. And you could tell that instantly, just her expression changed. Not that we had a perfectly pleasant conversation up until then. It was a really, really nice conversation. But when she realized that I wasn't trying to get something out of her. Now, here's an individual that's had a tremendous career in public policy, has had a tremendous career in the think tank community. So she's used to lots of individuals who are sort of, who were trying to sort of make it, who were coming to her, dropping off a resume, trying to get a job. And when she realized that I was just coming to her just because I wanted to hear her story, and that I just said, look, I just really admire you and your career, and I would love just a cup of coffee to talk, but I'm not looking to get anything out of you. I just wanted to have a conversation. She said, wow, she said most times when people your age come to me, it's because they're looking for a job. And I said, no, I want to hear your story. And I found that on balance, that kind of interaction, it's going to build your network, for lack of a better word. I think it's going to build your network much more effectively, much more sustainably when people realize that you take an interest in them, not just when they can do something for you, but just you're interested in their work, you're interested in their origin stories, you're interested in their lives. And so I think that's sort of the third and final piece of advice I would give. Value people as people. Don't just look at them instrumentally. Don't just think about what they can do for you. Take an interest in them over the long haul. And I think that those relationships will serve you very well.